Hello and welcome. In this video, we will explore how architects deal with history and tradition in their work. Should architects continue using ideas from the past, or should they break away from tradition and create something completely new? We will look at two important texts: Stanford Anderson's essay, Architecture and Tradition That Isn't Tradition, and Peter Eisenman's essay, The End of the Classical. These texts offer very different views. Anderson believes tradition still matters, but we must think critically. Eisenman says classical ideas are finished, and it's time to move on. Let's explore their ideas and see how they help us answer a big question. Should architects build upon the past or break away from it? Let's begin with Stanford Anderson. He writes about tradition, but not as something fixed or decorative. He argues that architects should not just imitate old styles. That's not real tradition. That's prestige or nostalgia. Instead, Anderson says we should treat tradition as something living, something that we can change and develop over time. So, how can architects engage with tradition critically? According to Anderson, we must understand the ideas, principles, and meaning behind tradition buildings, and then rethink them in a modern way. For example, a traditional building might use symmetry to show harmony, and a modern architect can understand this idea and express harmony differently. Maybe thought light, space, or material without copying the old look. Anderson says architects need to act like interpreters, not imitators. We must look at what traditions meant in their time, and then ask how we can translate those meanings into today's context.
Now let's turn to Peter Eisman. His essay is called The End of the Classical, The End of the Beginning, The End of the End. The title already shows that he sees architecture as entering a completely new phase. So, what does Eisman mean by the end of the classical? Classical architecture from the Greek to the Renaissance focused on order, harmony, and meaning. Architecture followed rules, symmetry, proportion, hierarchy. It was meant to reflect ideas about nature, beauty, and society. Eisman says those rules no longer apply. He believes that modern life is too complex and the old systems don't help us understand the world anymore. Instead of continuing tradition, we should break it. For Eisman, architecture should be about form itself, independent from function, culture, or history. He wants to explore pure shapes, abstract systems, and new languages for design. A good example is his House 6. It doesn't follow traditional structure or function. It has stairs that don't go anywhere and forms that don't make sense in usual way. But that's the point. Eisman wants us to think about space from differently. This is a radical formalism. Architecture is no longer about meaning from history, it's about internal logic and invention. So, how to understand and Eisman see the role of the architect? Anderson thinks architects are part of a cultural conversation. They study the past, reflect on it, and carry its meaning into the future. Meaning comes from culture, history, and society, and the architects helps make that meaning visible. Eisman sees the architect as an autonomous creator. The architect invents new systems and forms without needing to follow cultural or historical meanings. The building doesn't have to tell a story, it becomes meaningful through its internal logic. So we see two different ideas of authorship. First is Anderson, architects as interpreter of history. And the next is Eisenman, architect as inventor of new languages. And the two different weaves of meaning. Anderson, meaning is connected to cultural traditions. Eisenman, meaning comes from itself. This brings us to an important question. Can Eastman's radical formalism be reconciled with Anderson's critical view of tradition? It seems difficult. One looks forward, the other looks back. But maybe there is a way to combine their ideas. Both thinkers agree that architecture should not be empty decoration. They both ask architects to think deeply, not to copy, but to question. And they both believe that architecture should express ideas, not just serve function. So perhaps an architect can start with cultural awareness, like Anderson, but still be formally inventive, like Eastman. For example, a building could reflect historical principles like ritual or hierarchy, but express them in new abstract ways. It's not about choosing between past and future, it's about building a critical relationship with both.
Now let's return to the main question. Should architects today break from our built-up and historical precedents? There's no single answer. It depends on the context, the project, and the values of architect. In some cases, history offers deep meaning. In others, it may limit creativity. But what's important is that architects don't act automatically. We shouldn't copy the paste just because it's familiar, but we also shouldn't reject it just to be different. Instead, we must ask, what ideas from history are still useful? What needs to be changed or questioned? How can we design with both memory and imagination? In today's world, with climate change, global cultures, and rapid technology, we need both innovation and reflection. Architecture should be forward-looking, but also aware of where we come. To conclude, Anderson teaches us that tradition is not something we copy, but something we understand and rethink. Eisman tells us to leave tradition behind and search for new forms and systems. One builds meaning from history, the other builds meaning from form. These are two powerful ways of thinking, and us as future architects are scholars, we don't need to choose one path completely, we can learn from both. Architecture is always changing, but it's also full of memory. Thank you for listening.